The thing about first impressions is that you only ever get to make one, and never is that more true than the world of big budget filmmaking. It seems like only yesterday that James Gunn was being hailed as the saviour of DC on film, taking over a struggling franchise that had failed to launch as a dark and edgy Marvel alternative under Zack Snyder, failed to reorganize itself under a trio of girl bosses when that fad came and went like a fart in the wind, and even failed as The Rock's own personal vanity project, pretty much signalling the end of his decade of box office domination. But a saviour had arrived in the form of James Gunn, the visionary director of Guardians of the Galaxy and, other stuff. Sure, he might have dismissed arguably the most popular actor to play Superman since Christopher Reeve literally weeks after he announced he was returning to the role. Sure, he cancelled every upcoming project except anything that starred his wife, and made sure to give his brother a major role that he totally didn't deserve. And sure, he was arguably a one-trick pony who tried to make every movie into Guardians of the Galaxy, but just don't think about it too much. Just keep telling yourself that James Gunn's amazing and everything's gonna somehow work out fine.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
But it turns out that everything didn't work out fine. The James Gunn honeymoon period is well and truly over now, the enthusiasm has died down, and after one underwhelming movie and two disappointing TV shows, the whole world seems to be coming to the same realization. This whole James Gunn thing probably wasn't a good idea, was it? An article in Forbes a couple of days ago painted a grim picture of Superman's box office performance. With a total haul of 615 million worldwide, the movie cleared just over 300 million after all the distributor fees were paid, nowhere near the 350 million needed to cover production and marketing costs. This, dear viewer, is what we call a flop.
No shit!
And keep in mind, Forbes is a pretty well-established industry publication with a long history of painting the most optimistic picture possible for big studio movies. If even they're admitting that Superman was a failure, you know it must be fucking bad. And this isn't just any old failure either. This isn't some obscure character from a limited run comic that we're talking about here. It's Superman, arguably the single most iconic superhero of all time. If you can't even make him work on screen, then what chance have you got with anyone else? Things aren't much better on the TV side of things either. Creature Commandos, which was actually Gunn's first entry in the DCU, was pretty much ignored and mostly irrelevant because really, who the fuck cares about an animated TV show about a bunch of characters nobody's ever heard of that's only loosely connected to the new shared universe? Peacemaker Season 2 was Gunn's big passion project, probably because it stars his own wife who just mysteriously keeps getting cast in James Gunn projects. Oh my goodness, it must be a complete coincidence. Gunn himself hyped the show up relentlessly, constantly banging on about how important it was to DC's future and all the stuff that it was gonna set up.
Liar!
Because truly, if there's one guy you can always rely on to tell it like it is, and never resort to hyperbole and cheap sales tactics to drum up interest in his work, it's James Gunn.
Wrong.
None of it made any difference though. The show failed to even break into the Nielsen top 10, there was practically no conversation about it online, and Gunn's decision to jam a bunch of modern day political lectures into the narrative with all the subtlety of a tactical nuclear strike at a time when most people are getting pretty fucking tired of that crap only served to divide an already small fan base. The result? Well, after a strong premiere, interest in the show flatlined and never recovered, and a potential third season was axed before season 2 had even finished airing. There's just no hiding it anymore. James Gunn's DCU is in deep trouble. It's barely even started and already people seem to have lost interest in it. And it's not like the best is yet to come either. Next year's gonna give us 2 more movies, Supergirl and Clayface.
Fuck.
Yeah, no offense guys, but if even Superman couldn't drum up audience interest, what chance do you think this drunken arsehole's gonna have? And I think maybe it's time to face reality with this one. Whatever it was gonna take to get DC back on track after years of mismanagement, James Gunn wasn't it. I know the loyalty some people feel towards that dude borders on religious fanaticism, but even the most die-hard James Gunn fan should be able to recognise the mistakes he's made. His first big mistake was failing to make a clean break from the old DCEU. DC on film was a complete mess by the time he took over. Not only did it have a whole bunch of conflicting creative visions for the DC shared universe, with elements of the old Snyderverse still lingering on, aborted characters and discarded plot threads lying around everywhere, questions about whether Henry Cavill would return as Superman, no fewer than 3 different versions of Batman active at the same time, a Joker spin-off that was disconnected from everything else, a Batman solo movie with a sequel still in the works, Suicide Squad and the Peacemaker spin-off that were personal projects of Gunn's, and even a Snyder cut of Justice League. What he really should have done was kill everything, let the franchise rest for a couple of years, and then do a hard reset, starting over with a completely blank slate. Instead, he went for a confusing and convoluted halfway house solution, axing most of the old DCEU but still carrying Suicide Squad and Peacemaker over into the new continuity. Isn't it funny how people and projects that are personally connected to James Gunn always seem to make the cuts? He also kept the Matt Reeves Batman and the Todd Phillips Joker movies in their own separate continuities, with plans to introduce his own version of Batman and Joker into the DCU.
Son of a bitch!
Excellent stuff, James. That's not going to be confusing for general audiences at all. The point is that instead of the hard reset that was desperately needed, all we really got was just another rushed, poorly thought out course change from a studio that was too timid to make hard decisions, too impatient to wait, and too stupid to know what to do with its own IPs. No wonder audiences weren't buying into it. There's no reason to believe this version's even going to be around in a few years, so what's the point in getting invested in it? His second big mistake was inserting his own creative sensibilities into every project. James Gunn definitely has talents as a writer and director, but the problem is those talents are focused in a very narrow range, and instead of hiring other people who might be better suited to a project, he instead tries to make everything work his way. Watch any James Gunn movie or TV show and you've pretty much seen them all because they all adhere to the same basic formula. A bunch of flawed but likeable misfits are forced to team up and have to work together to take down some big overarching threat, eventually becoming a kind of dysfunctional family along the way. Usually accompanied by a lot of snarky, self-deprecating humour, incongruous pop music that underscores big action set pieces, and a troubled protagonist with a dark past. It's fine for what it is, I guess, but once you've seen it 5 or 6 times, well, it starts to get old real fast, and it really underscores how the guy's writing sensibilities peaked like 10 years ago and haven't moved on since. More importantly, it's not a formula you can apply to every situation, and Superman was a perfect example of that. You could see how hard he was trying to bend the character into the classic James Gunn mold, but it just wasn't working because Superman was fundamentally incompatible with his style of writing, and no amount of shitty, misplaced humour was going to change that. The result is that DCU was starting to feel more like James Gunn's own personal vanity project, made by and for one person only: James Gunn. He keeps the projects alive that he personally cares about, consistently hires friends and family who matter to him, and runs projects that he's totally not suited to in the way he personally enjoys. Here's the thing though, James, when you're the head of a multi-billion-dollar film franchise, it's not really about what you want anymore, it's about the audience and what they want, and it seems like the gap between those two things is getting wider with each new release. Say what you want about Kevin Feige, but the guy's at least smart enough to know his own limitations as a creative and let other people take up the slack. Now there's even rumours that if Warner gets bought over by Paramount, in a deal that's looking increasingly possible, Gunn and his entire DCU will be the first out the door. And honestly, I wouldn't blame them one bit, because not only has Gunn fumbled what should have been a slam dunk, but there's nothing in the immediate future that can turn it around for him. I mean, what's the alternative here? Keep throwing good money after bad? Keep allowing James Gunn to churn out James Gunn projects made purely for James Gunn? Like I said before, you only get one chance to make a first impression, and something tells me this could be James Gunn's last. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.